Talk
Only on
about
sticky notes.
announcements.
Okay, so for folks who are maybe new with us tonight, we are discussing the Feywild arc, which is the arc right before it goes. There's the early days arc, then the Earth, the Elemental Chaos arc, the Earth Elemental Plane arc, the Feywild arc, Barmwitch, Velsum, and then everything that you've seen on stream. So this is the last arc that we have to cover before we are completely caught up. In our previous part 1 of the Feywild, which you can find both here on Twitch in our History and Lore section, as well as on YouTube in our History and Lore section, perfectly cataloged within the order. So if you want to listen to it chronologically, you can. Bless you for those of you who are going through it. I know, I see you out there. I love it. So last time we learned about the that Callie had told us about the Baron and her history, and that she wanted to track him down. We also learned that if we were going to, she felt that there was some corruption happening in the Feywild, so we needed to go. So we had been given some tips from Kamea that we needed to go to Alderwood, which is her home place, like the place where she's from. But she was exiled from there for some reason we don't know. So we're gonna go figure that out. We also have Kern and Mira, Kern Burnman and Mira N, who are citizens of Svel N that we rescued from the Earth Elemental Plane, and we had to get them out of Wolfreen and return them to Svel'En. So we are in the process of doing that. So what we had done at the end of last episode was we had bounced to the air elemental plane for the first time, where we had come to a place known as the Gateway, which was where Groombar's fate was sealed between after he was destined to wander the wastes, but using the shard of Groombar, which Kokani had worn around his neck, as well as some magic and some puzzles and all that kind of good stuff. We had released Groombar from his exile, which was his punishment for his participation in the Dawn War, so that he may once again look upon his sister Akadi. And then we got rocked off the island, thrown through the clouds. We all passed out except for Callie. She saw a god, and now she speaks another language, I think, but we'll get there.
Sorry, Sean, is that a sore spot?
Oh, no. There's something really interesting off screen. Had to look at it real quick.
So we pick up with session 36. This is called Trinkets and Travels, happening on July 24th, 2019. So we awaken on the steps of the Temple of Akadi in Soral, which is carved in her likeness. It's 15 stories high with stone islands kind of floating around pillars, unclear as to what keeps them in place. And this place is obviously designed for folks who can fly. Like there's no vehicles or anything like that. This is definitely designed for Arakocra or flying folks. We are tended to by Chi. So apparently we had been passed out on the temple steps for a day and a half.
They left you there for a day and a half?
Yeah. Because
They were
she's
like,
like,
just
we don't
go
know.
go around
Just
them.
go around them.
When you guys woke up, was it like pylons so that people wouldn't step on you?
I think
So
there was
they
just
were
a
just
bunch
like,
of acolytes just
can
like
we-
watching over us to make sure
Can we
we
get
were
some
okay.
pylons around them so that people don't trip?
Little cones.
Little cones, some tape.
Pine cones, technically. No. So we'd been unconscious for a day and a half.
'Cause of birds.
Because they're
Because of
birds.
birds. Aw.
We awaken, and an acolyte, like Chi had been tending over us, and the acolytes had been like making sure we weren't dying. We were just unconscious for a day and a half on the steps. She didn't want to. She was like, I don't know what's happened. They're here.
Should we wake them?
Wake?
Nah.
That's
Just
not
let
gonna
them
happen.
sleep. They look tired.
So she welcomes us inside. The temple is entirely open air, and there's no way to get between the floors other than flight. So there's that. There's runes that are lining the temple walls. Chi grants us essentially free use of the temple and accommodations. She's like, rest, recuperate before you head on your travels. Like, it's obvious you've been a long way. There's some food, and it's mostly like gruel, like an oatmeal kind of thing, bugs, berries. There's a cider that's like an alcoholic cider that's pretty good. But other than that, it's just like mostly bird food.
As you'd expect from the bird people.
Yes. So we learned that in the air elemental plane, primarily its denizens are Arakocra, air genasi, genie, who are air genies, storm giants, cloud giants who run a lot of the shops in the bazaar, and the rock giant, ROC, who is known as the Balance of Saral, who we've never met.
So it's just a big, big bird.
We don't know.
Because rocks are big, big birds.
Yes, but a giant, it's a rock giant. Maybe it's a giant that tends to a rock. I have no idea.
Got a great clothing line.
Because it's not a giant rock.
No.
It's a rock
giant.
giant.
Yes. So Spooky asks to see the library. Pardon me. And so
I'm throwing it out right now. The rock giant is a giant that's got a rock strapped to its back, not unlike Falcon from the Avengers, and he just flies around with this big it's kind of like a Banjo-Kazooie situation.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the rock giant. Okay, please continue.
That. No, we love it. It's good. So Spooky asks to see the library. So she is flown up. Chi flies her up about 10 stories to this huge library full of books. There are a few books in common, but most of them are in Orin, the language of the air elemental plane. But she finds a few. There is Geographica Gelatinosa, which is a book on oozes, but she doesn't read that one because she didn't have time. There's might have been useful, but this again was about 100 sessions ago. The tag, because we're on session 132 now. We're at the Tao of Air, which is a philosophical look at the plane of air and how it works. A book on plane shifting, as well as the manipulation of air, a study of air magic. And she learns a couple little spells from that as well. Callie practices some flying maneuvers with her wings and trains some of the acolytes in fighting and combat in ways that they hadn't been trained before. Whereas, so Letters and Finnan were not here with us.
No.
They were on a boat. At this
we'll
point,
get there.
We'll get there, because I don't think Adam or Sean could make this session. So Neppy and Kokanee spend some time with Chi and do a lot of talking about the Dawn War. So there's an incoming lore dump right here. Let's get ready. Most of this information, buckle your butts, we're in for some Dawn War lore. So most of this information is also in the Dawn War episode, which is also here in our History and Lore section on Twitch, as well as on YouTube. So this is a recap for those of you who have listened to that. So Zacchus was originally from the airplane and was a priest and a scholar. He grew really restless, and he desired to learn more about the world and its planes, so he left the airplane quite suddenly. And she reckons that all of the knowledge poisoned his mind. So he kind of got a bit too big for his britches. And in his mind, his kind of like conspiracy theory was that he thought Akkadi was unjustly sealed in the air elemental plane for her role in the Dawn War. So Akkadi and Groombar actually created the material plane. So it was their crafting that created the world of Terrace as we know it. And the Primordials then crafted the world from parts of themselves, Earth, they contributed and spent many eons in harmony with the denizens that were there. But as new gods grew, because people started worshipping new gods as civilization started to rise, they felt very pushed aside. And it was said that Istitia, who is the which elemental primordial?
God of Water.
Thank you very much. The water primordial was turned to war. We were uncertain of why at the time, but we now know that this was because of Tharizdun's influence. And her brother and counterpart, Garrix, who is the
God of
Fire God.
Thank you.
Clarence.
You're doing so good.
Screaming in my Bugatti.
Went alongside her because the two of them is kind of like two counterparts, brothers and sisters. Groombar was then convinced by both Garrix and Istitia, and Akkadi reluctantly followed in. She didn't want to go to war, and Kokanee had actually had a vision of when Akkadi made the decision to go into war, with Arathis basically saying, please don't do this. Please don't come into the war. And Akkadi was like, I have to, because my brother has gone in. And Arathis was just like, okay, I guess you're doing this. So the gods of material plane followed suit to get involved in this war. Some were more eager, but some were more reluctant than others. Pelor. Do we think Pelor was quick to jump in with the Dawn War?
Hell yeah. Pelor lives for that shit.
Yes, he was very quick to jump in and defend mankind, as was Cord, who is the god of what?
War!
Fighting.
Storms.
Big fight.
He's the god of the storm and thunder.
But also fighting.
But also, yeah, he's the good god of war. Yeah.
Okay,
in
half
the good
point
path.
for
Yeah.
Sean.
Half point for you guys.
So
Speaking
wait, it's thunder and fighting?
like storms and fighting. Yes.
Storms and fighting.
Yeah.
But not the god of the sea.
No.
Okay.
No.
So Melora's just like, enjoy all these waves, ooh la la, and Cord's like, ha 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 ha, ha. Enjoy these big waves.
Exactly.
I'm curious what their relationship is like. Anyways, continue.
I'd love to know that. I'd love to watch all the gods sit down and have dinner.
I've never known of a pantheon in which the god of storms and the sea aren't the same person. So those tend to go hand in hand.
Yes.
But we've got a real, like, I'm the god of peanut butter and I'm the god of jelly. And together we make sandwiches.
Yes, 100%.
Anyways,
everyone knows that's all you need for a sandwich is peanut butter and jelly.
Pretty much.
I don't know what world you live in, Yanis, but yes.
You ever do a peanut butter jelly lettuce wrap?
No, but I also don't just put peanut butter and jelly together and go, that's a sandwich. There's other components that are almost more crucial, I would say, to what the definition of a sandwich is.
No, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, what else you got, Ellen?
Arathis was really reluctant, as war is the death of civilization, but also was, knew that she and her people had a part to play in war because war is a time of great innovation. So she was that kind of ambivalence towards war. Melora was also pretty reluctant to go to war. She sees war as the pathway towards the death of the natural world, and also felt she owed the primordials a great debt for creating the world which she was able to preside over. So Melora was reluctant but did end up joining. Bane, the darker god of war, also rose quickly, and then Tharizdun, god of the abyss, initially sided with the primordials and waged war against the material gods, but in the final days of their side losing, which they did, he begged for forgiveness to save himself from the prime material gods and thus got himself banished to the abyss, and that's why he was stuck there.
That was his forgiveness?
Pardon? That was his penance, essentially. So he asked
the best case scenario was the banishment.
Yes.
What would have been worse?
Fricasseed.
We don't know.
Like he was now, currently, potentially. And though Chi doesn't tell us this, we know that Tharizdun was bound by 7 seals, created by the main gods who fought in the Dawn War. Moradin created the Artisan's Hammer, Pelor created the Gatestone at the Gatestone Keep, Ioun created the Coin of Aegis, Arathis was the key that now resides in Kokanei's chest, Io created the Hand of Io, and then there's 2 we're unsure of. The Eye of the King, which was a giant ruby, that we don't know which god created that. And then Ubtao. So Ubtao is a lesser-known primordial who is known as the Keeper of Jungles, but betrayed his own kind. So he was a primordial who betrayed his own kind to side with the prime-material gods in the Dawn War, and we granted him continued existence on the material plane. So he slumbers in the jungles of Clore.
So there's technically 5 primordial gods.
He's a lesser primordial, but yes.
He's like the elemental plane of Ash. Yeah. Is like technically an elemental plane, but doesn't count. He's the Titan of Jungles.
Yeah, very special type of the world.
Can we go to the elemental plane of Jungles? Is that a thing?
I don't think so. I think going to visit Ubtao in Clore would probably be the closest thing that we can do to that.
I need a way to remember Ubtao. Sean?
Ubtao. Ubtao, gotta go now. Get my Bugatti. Ubtao growing. Wow.
Ubtao Funk?
I'm giving you 1 minute. You have
funk me up.
1
minute.
Funk.
Ubtao funk you up. Ubtao. How did he get so many jungles? He got it from the plant store in the Megavis Bugatti. I don't know.
You can workshop it. You boys can workshop it. So the other primordials were sealed away in their planes, and some were more sealed than others. So Garrix was exiled to slumber for eternity in the fire plane. So that's where he was destined for eternity. That's like, no, you are never allowed to come back ever. Grumbar was exiled to wander the wastes of the material plane, of the earth plane. He wasn't allowed to return to the Scar, which was like his home base. Akkadi was given free reign in the air elemental plane as long as she didn't leave. She was the last to join in the Dawn War and the first to surrender. So she was given kind of like free reign by the gods, and she and Arathis were apparently actually quite close. The ice primordial, who we know about, Ishfael, was killed in the final days of the Dawn War, which we know happened in Caradoc, but it was unclear how Istitia was defeated, and we know that Istitia was doomed to the depths. But now we know we've seen Istitia when we did that tiny little pop through the water elemental plane. Then Nepi asks Chi about the Raven Queen, because at this point we don't know. Like, Nepi knows that like her iconography is coming up with stuff around the Dawn War, or has come up, but we don't know why she was killed. That we didn't learn that until much later. So Chi knows that the Raven Queen was betrayed, but doesn't know much other than that. This is also the first telling we've ever heard of Io. This is the first time we've ever heard the name Io mentioned, and she describes her as the Great Dragon, or the All-Mother. And we don't know anything else about these incidents other than this. So that's that Dawn War lore. While Chi and Nepi are kind of chatting, Kokanee goes to take looks through some of the scrolls that Chi has on Arathis, and he reads about the meeting between Arathis and Akkadi before the Dawn War began, with Arathis encouraging Akkadi not to join. He reads about the meeting between Akkadi, Arathis, Cord, and Pelor, where Akkadi surrendered, and Arathis convinced the other gods to take mercy on Akkadi, and Arathis helped Akkadi create the air elemental plane. So that's why the architecture here is really beautiful, and a lot of it is reminiscent of Caraxian architecture. Kokanee starts putting together the pieces of that. And then we read about the meeting where Grumbar's fate was sealed, which is Arathis, Moradin, Akkadi, and Grumbar. Their decision was final, despite Arathis's pleadings to, kind of have to go take mercy. And Akkadi sacrificed part of her magic to save her brother from worse fate. So Akkadi said, fine, I will stay in the airplane with limited resources as long as my brother is not destined to a worse fate than just wandering the wastes in his plane. So I was like, oh, that's sweet. That's very sweet. So we thank Chi profusely for her time and for taking care of us for a couple days. And then we spend the rest of the day there resting before we then pop down via plane shift to Svelin, on the front steps of the castle of the King of Svelin, who is named King...
Arid.
Close.
Bird.
Evard.
No.
Evard.
Yes. King Evard N of Svelin. So we look around the city and there is mass destruction present. Like, half of the city is in shambles after being attacked by the Wolfrenian army. We go inside and we present Kern and Mira, basically saying, here they are, we've brought them home. And we're immediately taken to see King Evard through a throne room. We're greeted by General Durick and Captain Conroy, both of whom we had met very briefly before, very early on in the campaign. Evard is laid out in bed, and he looks pale and weak, and that he's aged. He has a huge impact wound, on his abdomen, that looks to be from the assault that happened on the city. And a cleric in the room says it hasn't been healing. I've been trying everything, and I cannot heal him. I don't know what's happening. And then Nepi, of course, says, can I help? Can I try? And they said, well, please, we'll take anything. And Mira begs her to please heal him. So Nepi uses life transference on King Evard, and in the process breaking one of her own ribs.
Ooh, yucky.
She heals him. She heal her body takes a bunch of damage. I think she heals him for something for 85 hit points. And she just almost doubles over and she heals him. And it looks like the king has gotten years back on his life. So he's very much indebted to her, and Kokanee heals her. He heals Nepi immediately. She's bleeding from her nose and is just clutching her sides. So then Evard kind of gets back on his feet, and we give him a moment to prepare himself, and we go and have a meeting with him, and he lets us know that the house that we had been gifted in Svelin originally had been commandeered as a field hospital. So we don't have our house there anymore. And we just were don't worry about it. We've got a keep that's currently being built right now. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And he's like, okay. And he grants us free stay at the nicest inn in town for a couple days. Nepi sends to Letters and Finnan and hear that they are about 6 hours outside the city. from their travel here, so they're on their way. And we send to Kamea, and she lets us know that they're going to be choosing a new queen or a new monarch in a couple days' time. So we're like, okay, we know that Cora is going to put in a bid. We know that we're trying to convince Kamea to put in a bid, so we know that that's coming. So we're like, let's just try and get back to Wolfrene before that happens. So Conroy and Durek, the two, like the general and the captain of the guard, try to start beginning to convince King Evard to start mounting a counterattack against Wolfrene, against Southwatch, which is one of the like Wolfrenian-controlled cities in the lower part of the continent that is closer to Svelin than Wolfrene is. And we plead with them not to attack. We're like, please, please, please don't do it. Like, strive for peace. And Evard finally acquiesces, but he says Wolfrene has to make the first steps towards peace. He's like,
sick, easy.
He's like, they attacked us. Mira was not at fault for what happened. I will not make any counterattacks, but they must make steps towards peace. So we ask about the battle. The harbor, the castle, and the artisans' quarter were heavily damaged. But Princetown, which is like the middle class district, and the temple district are okay. So a lot of the city will take time to rebuild. We then head to the Golden Banker, and Neppy and Callie head to bed, and Kokanee and Spooky stay up for a bit and wait for Letters and Finnan to arrive. They arrive a little later than anticipated, as Letters was really busy leading a drum circle in Scrun Row, which is like the skids of town. And then Kern Burnman came across them, and he broke up the drum circle and then took them to the Golden Banker.
Fucking Kern got a problem with drum circles?
Apparently. And Clack is vehement that he hates the ocean and never wants to be on a boat ever again because he's too dense and he's terrified of sinking. Oh my God, someone just like threw a package at my door. In the morning.
Amazon's here.
Yeah, they're just throwing.
I got your egg delivery.
Yeah, right. In the morning.
ICAST Express package.
In the morning, we head to Adonis's shop and we buy a bunch of knickknacks. Neppy finds this glowing orb that seems to be part of a planetary system. Kokanee gets this small dragon statue, which he later gave to Neppy as an engagement gift, and a tall genie bottle with like a pale blue liquid with a small dog's paw inside. Do we know what kind of potion that is? I don't know if Kokanee's ever used it. Spooky finds a jar with a 6-fingered hand in it. Just her little weird jar with a 6-fingered.
I feel like that came up later.
It did. It came up.
What became of the 6-fingered hand?
I believe it had to do with the mind flayers. I think. So Callie finds a small flute, like a recorder, and a jar of pale white liquid. She also buys 2 rings. A ring of warmth, and a gold band that has a levitating ruby on the top of it. And Letters finds a small ornate bronze coin that when you flip it, stops rotating mid-air. And a ring of mind shielding.
And now, of course, you'll all remember this very special ring.
Yes.
As having a certain somebody's soul locked inside.
Yes.
One formerly known as Volkith, now known as Rysel. But check out the Meat Prison arc to see how that. This is where we got the ring. I was just like, hey, what do you got, strange man? He was like, I've got this ring. I'm like, sick. It's $1. I'll take it.
I think
Great.
It was like 5 gold pieces or something.
Yeah.
Like you did not spend a bunch of money on it. And then Finnan doesn't buy anything. So we then head north on the road towards Alderwood, because Alderwood is like a day or 2 travel north of Svelin. And Letters figures out that the ring he bought has sentience in it. It seems to be a drow wizard named Volketh, who only speaks in Undercommon, and they begin communicating through our favorite pattern of doot doot loot doots. Doot doots.
Doot 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 doot.
Dude.
That was how it started.
That is
everybody knows if I can shave and a haircut. 2 bits.
Absolutely. So we ride for the first day on a well-traveled path, and we essentially make it to the path that you turn off towards Torred, where we had been at the start of the campaign. So we've almost made a full circle around the continent and the plains at this point. And we camp in a really common spot, and it's a very uneventful night. On our second night of travel, the road becomes less worn, or day of travel, and we don't see any other travelers. There's a river traveling parallel to the road, and we travel to the end of the day and bed down for the night. Neppy and Callie and Spooky take first watch, and it's very quiet. Like, too quiet. We hear some deer heading south. Spooky sends Wiggles into the woods, and he doesn't return, and she just can't pop him back. So Kokanee and Letters take second watch, and then they hear this faint whooshing of wings, and see two larger shapes coming out of the woods, each with a large wingspan silhouetted in the dark, and a figure emerges from the tree line, and they hear a click. Kokanee gets shot in the chest with a heavy crossbow and takes a fuck ton of necrotic damage, and that is where we ended the session. So we're in the middle of a watch.
The fuck is that? Who's that?
Exactly.
I don't remember that.
I don't know
Who's
if
that
you
guy?
I think you were there for that session. In any case, moving forward, session 37 was another Adventures in Clore episode, so we will move past that. So that's 2 sessions technically that we've been through.
We're doing great.
We're doing so good.
Killing.
Session 38, called They Mostly Come at Night, and on August 1st of 2019. Mostly. So we open in combat with Finnan and Letters getting locked in a force cage because, again, both Sean and Adam couldn't make it to the session. Turns out we're finding spiny devils and what seems to be a bounty hunter of some kind who is hellbent on capturing Callie, and shoots Kokanee in the chest to get him out of the way, and then starts trying to throw Callie in a net and drag her away. And we
Weren't
managed
you guys like part of a bounty hunter bar?
We are blooded with the Stalker's Pact, yes.
And that didn't help you guys with this?
No.
You guys weren't like, hey, yo, we're Stalker's Pact. And they were like,
this guy wasn't that kind of bounty hunter.
Oh, okay.
As Callie started
The
doing
dude
damage,
travels with devils, bruh. You got spine devils.
He's a fiend. So we managed to finish
Boy,
off
easy.
this bounty hunter devil. And we finished the rest of the night unaccosted and try to keep a low profile in the woods. So we travel for the rest of the way on a smaller road and see a town in the distance. We could travel by boat, since we have a boat with us that could travel us around, but we decide to ride the rest of the way because Clack doesn't want to go in the water, and neither does Kokanee. So we get there later in the day, and it seems like this lake has been poisoned. There are hundreds of dead fish floating on the surface with dead birds around the water's edge. And as we get closer, we see dark black smoke that is rising from this village, and we ride really hard on the horses for the rest of the way. As we arrive, we hear someone yell, "Hold!" And we're surrounded by a cloaked figure, 3 displacer beasts who seem to be holding their position on us. And the person who is cloaked comes out of the front. He's a Firbolg, and he's carrying a staff and asks us to identify ourselves. Callie speaks to him of her visions and says that she knows someone who sent us here to help. And he identifies himself as Yelric, who is the town elder, and that our arrival has been fortuitous because the town of Alderwood is in dire need. The displacer beasts then shift into a woman. One of the displacer beasts shifts into a woman named Vidania, who is another village elder, and Feywild, who is another one of the displacer beasts, shifts as well, and she is the village healer. And we offer our aid.
Hold up, because I happen to know displacer beasts ain't beasts. They are in fact monstrosities, the only other folks who can druid wild shape into monstrosities are Callie and her parents' family line,
Kamea's family,
Kamea, excuse me,
yes.
Into owl bears. Is there some sort of relation, funky
yes.
cross-pollination with these druids?
Yes.
Oh, tell us more about that.
So we know that Kamea is from Alderwood originally, and this is Kamea didn't tell us too much, but we knows that we're not supposed to speak her name here. We're not supposed to say that we know her. But yeah, Kamea is a druid, but she wild shapes into an owl bear, and that is the only thing Kamea wild shapes into. She doesn't wild shape into anything else. So a little bit behind the curtain, this is a homebrew druid circle that Tim and I have been working on for a really long time, called the Circle of the Bond. And we're really trying to workshop it, because how do you level up a monstrosity to get more powerful with challenge ratings? It's really difficult, but we're working on it, and we'll hopefully release it at some point, maybe in a campaign guide we write someday. So Vidania, who is one of the village elders, notices Callie's sword and is like, oh, you're guided by Melora. Fantastic. Good. You're here. Let's go. So all of these are druids who follow Melora, and all are druids who we learn shape shift into monstrosities of some kind. And these people are known as the Ashrif, and they are the keepers of the passage. So as we walk into town, it's kind of in two parts. There's some huts near the water line, as well as some houses within the tree line, kind of like tree houses, but there's a makeshift barricade kind of around the city at this point. And we see two owl bears upon entering the city that regard us very cautiously, and we have a sense that these are Kamea's parents, or at least related to Kamea, and we learned that their names are Galea and Rudan Skysinger. And we talk to Yelric and Vidania and Feywild, and they tell us that the forest has been blighted for some reason, and that the trees are sick, and there is a rot and a disease that is also transferring to the people. And that it's killed many of their townsfolk. And it's a disease that tends to rot them or like burn them from the inside out. And there have been Alderwood is really close to the Feywild, so usually the forest, the Alderdon forest, is really lush and green, but it's starting the trees, as we can see, are like not in good shape. They're like covered in like this fungus, and like the Vidania and Feywild and Yelric speak that they're almost hot to this touch, and like a smell of sulfur coming through the woods. And there have been attacks from creatures coming out of the woods in the night and assaulting the town. And they feel a great evil coming out of the woods. There's like this overwhelming corruption. Any normal beasts that would travel in the forest are feral. And they're just like turning everything really aggressive. And the blight, as I said, tends to rot things from the inside out. So they sent out a party to the Alderdon, the Alder Gate, which is the portal to the Feywild, but they haven't returned. It's not an easy journey, and one that if we're planning to go, they can't spare us a guide, because they're like, we literally don't have anybody. We are losing. Half of our town is sick. Like, we can't spare anybody else. And if we are to go to find the portal to the Feywild, we have to go into the forest and allow ourselves to get lost. And the portal will present itself when we are well and truly lost. And they believe that the gate is somehow related to the corruption. So we're like, okay, sure, that seems pressing at the moment, but let's help your people first. So we speak to Feywild, who is the healer, and she takes us to see the townsfolk who are like sick, and some are in dire straits, like on last legs. Callie, because Finnan had healing magic at this point. This was before he changed his pact. Yes, because he was Pact of the Celestial at this point.
Celestial.
Yeah, so Callie and Finnan and Neppy can start curing the diseases. So they like Callie goes to see the children, Neppy goes to see the worst of the worst folks who are like almost dead, and Finnan just starts tending to other people. Kokanee tends to wounded warriors and soldiers who are not infected by the blight, but who have been injured in the battles. And over the course of an evening, with all of them working in shifts and resting, they heal over 40 people collectively. Some are bringing like 7 or 8 of them back from the brink of death. Finnan essentially stays up all night, curing what he can, curing diseases, and then taking a short rest. Neppy taps all of her magic. Like, she's like, I'm just going to use all of my spell slots to cure disease and heal folks. And as does Kokanee. And Callie only leaves like herself with 1 spell slot left for Revivify, just in case we need it. So we try and get some rest. And we were woken at about 1 to 2 a.m. with these really sad and like yearning howls coming from the woods. Kokanee gets frightened and he can't go outside. Like, he's overcome by fright. They'll have to make wisdom saves. But the rest of us run outside to see what's happening. And after about a minute or so, he tends to shake it off and he comes and joins us. We kind of stand waiting outside. The howling stops. And then again, about 10 minutes later, we hear shouting and roaring. And the hellhounds run out of the woods and start attacking the town. We see owl bears starting to attack these hellhounds, which are the Sky Singers. We see an Ankeg, which is Yelric, a griffin, Vidania, displacer beasts. Oh, sorry, the displacer beasts were not Yelric, or Vidania and Yelric and Feywild. The displacer beasts were 2 wood elves named Leah and Lamless. My apologies. There's hippogriffs. There's a bullet. There's like a bunch of monstrosities, druids who can shift into monstrosities living in this town.
So the whole town is these things.
Yeah.
Sick.
It's super cool. And so there's magic abounding for those who can fight, but there's a lot of hellhounds, and we managed to kill them off, but it takes a while to kill them all off. And we head inside and we return to rest. And as we're heading inside, Callie speaks to Galea, Kamea's mother, and says, "I know another owlbear." It's not very often you see someone turn into an owlbear, and Galea's like, "Will you take her a letter?" And so Kamea has been essentially exiled, and they're forbidden from even speaking her name in the town. And that Galea tells Callie that Kamea's father will likely never forgive her for what happened.
What did Kamea do?
From my understanding, so all of the druids in the town have to go through a series of trials as like it's called the proving. It's like a rite of passage for all the druids in the town. Kamea was exceedingly talented, but I think an accident occurred and she ended up killing somebody. And she was like, as her punishment, she was exiled from the town. They got a pretty hard line with that. So then she traveled around a bit and then fell into politics, or met General Mergen Riza in Wolfreen, fell into politics, and is now into her thing now. And Callie asks Galea which ring is her favorite for Kamea, and I think Galea said the Ring of Warmth. So we rest the remainder of the night unaccosted. Nothing else comes out of the woods. In the morning, Kokanee and Neppy share their morning prayers as the sun rises and have a small breakfast picnic together, as they realize it's probably one of the last moments they'll actually be able to spend together, just the two of them for a while. And they savor the last of the coffee that Neppy had brought from Philenis with her, which is her favorite. So as we return, Yelric thanks us for our aid, and they let us know to keep an eye out for the scouting party. If we're in the Alderdon Woods, there was Kelkin, who's a furbolg, Cedric, a human, and Hassa, a female elf. But they haven't heard from them in over a week. So they're like, okay, keep an eye out for them. So we stock up on as much as we can, and we head out into the woods to get lost. Yelric takes us to the forest that kind of starts within the passage, and the trees look like they're starting to rot. But they're hot. They seem to be emanating warmth. Like if you put your hand up close, they would be really, really warm. Neppy touches one, and as she does, she moves her hand. Spooky inhales some of the spores, and she recognizes some of the fungus. It's a fungus from the Feywild, but it's called Silent Decay, and it seems to be much more potent than it should be, and it shouldn't be here. It shouldn't be in the material plane. It seems to be really growing fast and consuming most of the forest. So we pass on most of this information to Yelric. He says thank you, and he offers us 2 basic healing potions. He's like, this is all I can't offer you a guide, but I can offer you this. And we're like, thank you. That's much appreciated. And we head off into the Alderdon Forest to get lost. And that is the end of that session.
3 down.
That was 3.
3 down.
Did you want to do one more?
I think the next one is, I think we can bust through it because it's a lot of combat. It's a lot of a lot of solo encounters.
It is. So we actually
I think I remember enough about this. Can I?
Yeah, 1 second. So session 39 was another Adventures in Clore. So technically that's 4 we've gotten through today.
We got to have more Adventures in Clore. This is great for Chatwater. We love that.
And then session 40, happening on August 12th, 2019, is just titled Lost. So
can I start this one? Because I remember
go for it.
Pretty good. So, okay, we got to go through the Alderdon Woods. Spooky, spooky woods, Yanis. You got to get lost to it. We're like, okay, we can get lost. And so the party's like, we go. Tim says, roll survival. And we're like, all right, we're going to roll poorly or whatever. We do this 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
And just everyone has to fail. So it just statistically, someone's good enough survival to get above a 15, or I don't know if I can know. Yeah. So the party's like, oh, fuck. We are too competent
to get lost.
To get lost collectively.
Yes.
We're gonna have to do this solo. So
I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna jump in there too.
Yeah. Hop in.
So the first Spooky leads the first charge, because she's like, I know how to get us lost. Well, I'll do this. So she leads us for a while, and then we end up basically on the same path that we started out on. Finnan leads the second charge, and finds a pool of water that is pale blue with a thick grove of trees growing over top of it, and he feels this like big urge to stick his hand in it. And he does so, and we hear a snap of a branch. A wooden claw then drives through the ground right next to him, and the tree splits apart with dark black wood, and this is a devil bough, so it's a very corrupted tree. We fight with it. Kokanee gets the killing blow. And as we investigate this pool, there's something familiar to Callie and Finnan and Neppy about it. They're like, oh, this is like healing magic. This is like some interesting healing magic. And as we take a moment, and it's like the pool is connected to a bigger spring of like an underground system, we get the sense. And then as we take a moment to talk about the situation, this is the first time that Letters started asking Neppy about her goddess. And asking Neppy about Nephthisiket and the paths she walks. And he's like, I want to be really honoring of that. And I want to respect that. I'll be really reverent to your goddess and honor that. And I was like, okay, this is great. You can ask questions anytime. This is cool.
Yeah, there just weren't really gods where Letters
No.
comes from. Like, we had Groombar, but he's a primordial. Like, he's like an actual person just out in the waste. So, like, Letters coming in was like, so you've got a god. What's that like? A little peek behind the curtain. Letters was trying to delicately pose the question to Neppy what the difference was between a god and an owner, because he saw the similarities in the power structure in terms of the place he came from. But I was like, you seem like a pretty good person. I'm sure it's not that.
No.
But I would love you to illustrate in what ways it isn't.
I think you asked me something along the lines of like, does she tell you what to do? And I think Neppy said something along the lines of like, yes, but I'm the one who does it. And I do it because of my faith and my belief in her, not because like. And Neppy's coming to terms with her own ability, like her ability to see choice at this point. So it was it was a really interesting conversation about like Letters trying to tease this out, and Neppy being like the most devout one in the party, probably not the best answer with that at this point.
Seems pretty. They say you go and you go. Yeah. Regardless of what you want to do, but you want to do it.
But I want to do it. Yeah. That's kind of how that conversation went.
You've got control of your life, I see.
Absolutely. So Callie leads the third charge, and we find some brambles in the shape of a horseshoe with remnants of what seems to be a fire pit. We see two bodies that have massive gashes that are wearing robes of green and brown. We see a furbolg, who we assume to be Kelkin, Hassa, and an elf, which we assume to be Hassa, two members of the scouting party. And their bodies have been charred, and they look like they have been killed by a massively, like, big, sharp weapon. And there's clear signs of a struggle. And there's big paw prints nearby. So we give them Neppy gives them funeral rites, trying to do whatever she can to just, like, honor them in the ways possible. And Letters is like, well, how do you do this? And Neppy's like, well, in my religion, we burn our dead. And he just lights a bonfire, and she's like, oh, okay. And so she's like rifling through funeral rites to try and like get it done while they're burning.
I can do that.
He's
That's
just like,
my job.
I cast great bonfire. So we follow the footprints, and we follow the tracks to this like large rocky outcropping where we find a big white direwolf. And it is hurt and it's angry and it has like cold breath as well. It attacks us, but we manage to defuse the situation, and it turns back into Cedric, the human, the last member of the party. And he talks about being attacked by a large being on a fiery horse in the middle of the night near the moon spring, which is the little pool of water we found, and barely escaping with his life. He makes camp with us and we rest, and he surrounds us in like a grove of brambles for protection. Finnan tries to heal a tree. He like goes over and starts like trying to heal a tree, and some of the fungus falls off, but he gets frustrated that he's like, this won't work. Like, I don't know what we're going to do. And Neppy kind of tries to comfort him, reminding him of how much good he did back in the village, and that we have to treat the illness, not the symptoms. That we have to find the root of this. Healing one tree will not save this forest. And I think she told like a story or a parable about like when a bunch of people with a big illness come to Philenis, like how they have to go treat the problem, not just the people. So we take a watch. Neppy and Kokanee take first watch. hearing long, like, scary howls from the woods. Neppy asks him how long it's been since he sent something back to Velsum. And Kokanee worries that it's been way too long. They rummage through the bag, but there's nothing in there that they'd risk in the hands of Velsum. And Neppy basically tells him, she's like, I am keenly aware that there could be a morning that I wake up next to you and your heart has stopped beating. And I want to prevent that. So let's figure that out, how to do that, because that would wreck me if I couldn't save you or I was asleep and didn't know. Neppy, so in Kokanee's history, there was a priestess who kept bringing him back, who was under the employ of Velsum. But Kokanee never remembers seeing her, but knew it was a priestess because she was referred to as the priestess. Neppy asks him if it was a tiefling woman, but Kokanee isn't sure. So this is me wondering if it's Zesperia, the priestess who went missing after searching for the hand of Io, like hundreds of years ago. Because there was one priestess.
Did you guys ever find out?
Yes, that's on stream. It was Zesperia. Yes, Zesperia was the priestess in Velsum's employ who kept bringing him back, and we killed her. Super dead. Kokanee wasn't sure.
We've got her Kopesh, which we still haven't done anything with.
Yes, so her Kopesh were made from the hand of Io.
Yeah.
And she was the one who killed Hade.
Yeah.
So we had to kill her.
Bitch.
Super
Very
bitch.
Dramatic.
Very dramatic. So Neppy feels like a really strong sense of conflict. She's very grateful that Kokanee is here with her and that they're together, and she vows to make really good on her promise to find this priestess, whoever she was, and to have this priestess face the consequences of her actions, like perverting magic around death so much. And like, because Neppy's basically been like, she brought you back from death like 20 times, if not more than that, hundreds, who knows. That's not okay. Like, I'm very, very happy you're here, and I wouldn't want this any other way, but this priestess did something very wrong, and we have to go fix that. And so that's their first watch. Callie and Letters take second watch. He senses Callie's worry and reminds her that we're strong and that we're behind her, and that he promises he's going to punch the Baron's fiery horse to death.
On brand.
To be clear, the one thing we knew about this guy is that he loved his horse. He rides down on a nightmare, and everyone's like, "Oh, watch over the Baron." He rides down on a nightmare. He fucking loves this nightmare. I was like, "Yeah, he took everything you loved from you. I'll punch his horse to death."
Yes.
Like,
yes.
I can't promise that I'll kill him because that's your job. You're the fucking paladin of vengeance. But I will punch that guy's horse to death.
Yes.
That is an interesting point, though. Callie's given up her oath of vengeance, but now she never actually technically fulfilled her pact.
She thought she did.
She did. I know, but I'm just saying, like, she switched because she thought she did.
Yeah.
And now it turns out that she didn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder.
That is
actually
really
just switch back, but
that is something that's actually really interesting in terms of digging into, because she said, "I'm not mad anymore."
Yeah,
and that was like the core of it. Well, is she? And like, how is? Oh my goodness!
I think she is.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. If she's all like mad about it and like real mad about it, and she's like, "Time to get that vengeance." Ooh, that might be a problem with someone we're trying to... That's how he ties in! We figured it out! The fucking Baron Von Kron was the one thing we couldn't square. He ties in with the Matron of Vengeance because it's to tempt Callie back into vengeance. Oh, baby boy, we got it. We got there.
We might have it. I don't know. I don't know.
No,
I don't pretend to know. I don't pretend to know what's in the mind of Tim Carlson.
Then he's gonna get taken control of again because we love that for Len.
Yeah. Well, but he can't now because Letters does mind blank every day.
She can't be charmed, but if her heart is filled with vengeance in your butt, I don't think that's charming. I think it's like, let me do what you can do.
So our
matron's been to hell. Maybe the matron has the Baron.
Well, and we are in the Shadowfell right now, which used to be the matron's domain.
Oh my god!
Not for thousands of years, though. Anyway, so Spooky and Finnan take the last watch. It's very much like a cool aunt and a kid situation. Spooky figures is the only one that Finnan has ever truly admitted his age to, and he was 15. at the time.
Jesus
We have a
Christ.
15-year-old boy with us. And he talks about how his father renounced him, that he just wanted to make his dad proud, but his dad was also never satisfied. He always thought that his dad never wanted reminders of his mom around. And Spooky talks a bit about how the thorn gauges and they ruined her life. She doesn't give too many details, but that's what she gives out. So the next morning, we wake up. Cedric leaves us and says, I'm going to make my way back towards the village. I know how to get back from here, I think, now that I've figured out where we are, and I'm not hurt anymore. And he encourages us to separate. If we are going to get well and truly lost, he's like, the forest will never let you go forth in such a big party. Usually we go in smaller groups if we're trying to make it to the Alder Gate. So Letters and Clack grab a bunch of gloom moss out of their bag, which is essentially kind of like LSD. They pop a bunch of gloom moss and they go running into the woods on the drop of a hat, and they just go. And Neppy's like, oh okay. Neppy then casts Death Ward. I think Finnan just often runs, just takes off running. Also, he sees Letters and Clack going, and
action.
and he just fucking goes. So Neppy casts Death Ward on Spooky and Callie and Kokanee. And then Spooky and Callie leave also. Kokanee and Neppy spend a moment, and he casts Enhance Ability on her for dexterity. He's like, if I'm gonna leave you, I need to know that you're gonna essentially have the jump on things out there because you're not exactly great at that. And I was like, yeah, thanks. They say goodbye, and it's really hard. They'd only kind of just gotten back after Neppy's like, I almost lost you, and Kokanee's like, I almost lost you. So it's a hard parting for them. And
he didn't say you have to go alone. He said small groups. I mean, you guys could have stayed together.
They was pretty much like a you should go alone kind of thing. So we were like, okay, we're going alone. And so Neppy's says, I'm gonna come find you. I'm gonna go get lost, but I'm also gonna come find you as well. And Kokanee's like, I'll never stop looking for you. I'll find you. We were like, okay. So then they go. So Tim then kind of took us on individual little voyages. We all got our own little montages, which were pretty cool. So we start with Callie, and we see this clearing of vivid purples and red orchids with groupings of bodies that are not moving. The forest is super vibrant, and there's this wave of intensity that hits her, and it's like this big fey presence. She sees 3 muscular, gray-skinned figures. One of them is holding a crossbow, one of them is headless, and one of them is carried a javelin. She moves the bodies around, and she finds a heavily armored knight buried beneath them, and seems to be carved from wood with leaves as its armor. She touches the knight figure to try and uncover a bit more, and it whispers to her in a language she can't understand. The ground then starts to shake. She backs up, manages to make her save, and the ground starts swallowing the 4 figures, leaving the javelin, the halberd of the knight, and a couple of the weapons, and the place where the bodies were sprouts up into a small sapling tree. Callie starts feeling her memory start to fuzz, and she has to make a wisdom save, but she manages to keep herself together. She takes a look around. She can't really find anything else. She takes the javelin and then presses on and finds a large clearing in the woods. So that's kind of that's Callie's journey. Next, we follow Finnan. He pushes through the forest for about 3 hours, hears a giant crashing sound, and there's a massive brown bear that starts barreling past him with its cubs, and another bear behind it that's a bit bigger that seems to have arrows sticking out of its shoulders. He heals the bear with some of his little remaining healing magic, and the bear, in agony from getting shot, roars super, super loudly, and then takes off into the woods. Finnan then gets flanked by 2 centaurs, who seem to be belligerent, and they're just not communicating with him. They're he's trying to talk to them, and they're just yelling and screaming at him, they have seemed to have just had their minds corrupted by whatever's happening. He manages to fight off. He pops up darkness and manages to fight off both of them. And the bears, and he kills both the centaurs. The bears then emerge from the tree line and lead him out towards a clearing. Quite a similar clearing to Callie's, but we don't know that yet. And finally, the last vignette that we see in this session, and we'll end it here after today because I think it's a good cliffhanger. We start following Neppy. So she takes off about an hour and a half and finds a creek that seems to it travels uphill. So she starts following that because that's weird. So she starts following the creek that leads uphill. And as she comes over the ridge, she sees a massive creature that seems to be made out of bone, almost blending into the birch trees. It's ashy white, a long tail, armored, gaunt, thin frame, insect wings, an elongated jaw. And she stops, exactly where she is, and the creature turns to look at her, sees her, clocks her, and begins crawling towards her on the ground. And she just stands her ground. And that is where we ended session.
Yuck.
Yep. So that is very yuck. So that is part 2 of the Feywild arc. And
I do.
Go ahead, Sean.
No. You go ahead.
No, and we don't have too many sessions left. There's, I think, 2 or 3 sessions before